Welcome to our English episode of The Barbara Show. It's my pleasure to host this show every Sunday that I come in your house, on your TV screen, on your phone, on your laptop. If you're following us on YouTube, it's always a pleasure for me to host this show. Thank you for your support. I'll first tell you this. You have supported us. We have grown tremendously. Your views on YouTube, your likes, your comments, your feedback, I really treasure when you reach out and tell me what you think. So thank you so much. Now, as we always say, this is the show that features interviews, testimonials of different people, the young and the elder, us to become better people and to do better in what we do. So this is why we're here. It's coming from a place that I have been thinking about starting the previous month, June. We know that on the 20th June, it's Father's Day. And Father's Day got me thinking about so many things. What's the role of fathers in our societies? What's the role? Because we always, and yes, rightfully so, we praise mothers. And I'm a mother myself, and I enjoy the praise, and I know we are awesome. But what's the role of the fathers in our homes, in our society? And looking at the statistics, more families have passive absent fathers, and less families have active fathers. What's the difference? And what is the impact of fatherhood in our lives, fatherhood in our societies, and in our daily lives? It got me thinking, and it's against that backdrop that I invited one of my good friends. I actually call him my brother, you know. One of my good friends, he is a pastor himself. He pastors at CLA. Most of you know CLA, Christian Life Assembly in Kigali, Nyarutarama, and he is responsible for the men's department. He is Pastor Hassan Kibirango, but he's not just that. He is a businessman. We've worked together. He's a leadership coach. So if you need coaching, he's your go-to gentleman in the city. I like to say that he's your go-to gentleman when it comes to leadership coaching. He's also married and a father to 4 children. So having shared different stories with him, I knew he was the right person to come to this show and speak to us about fatherhood. Also, you know, glean from his personal experience with fatherhood and help us understand more what's the role of fatherhood in our families, in our societies. And we're here. Hassan, thank you so much for gracing this show with your presence.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a high time coming. Eh?
Yeah, I feel like I've arrived in life.
You have arrived.
I'm on the Barbara Show, so.
Thank you for honoring.
No, it's an honor.
It's
an honor to be here.
Thank you. So we are here talking about fatherhood. Is it a crisis? Is it a cause? But we will get to that. Let's start off with the statistics from different countries. The presence and absence of fatherhood and its role on the society, the impact it's having on the society. What do you think about that?
Oh, wow, that's a far-reaching question. I mean, the statistics, like you've said, speak for themselves. It is quite staggering when you hear what is happening in different nations because of the lack of present fatherhood. And very many of us are a product of fathers who are either passive or they were absent, or some people grew up without fathers completely. And very rarely do you have a father who is very intentional and active and present in the life of a child. And they track the growth of a child, play their role right until adulthood. And the results where that is the case, you always have amazing human beings turn out who are wholesome, who have a healthy self-esteem and self-worth. So yeah, the statistics are quite astounding. And there are some statistics here, if you don't mind me sharing.
Yes, you may.
And these were taken in South Africa in 2011. And they said that 63% of suicides come from fatherless homes.
Wow.
70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes. 80% of rapists motivated by displaced anger come from fatherless homes. 40% of all children do not live with their biological father. And this is in South Africa. 85% of children with behavioral problems, delinquency, come from fatherless homes. And 90% of homeless children come from fatherless homes. And then it says also that 71% of children who do not finish school dropouts, 71%, come from fatherless homes. Now, I know that this is a statistic that was carried out in one nation, but there's a global resonance. There's a global resonance. If you took the same statistic carried out anywhere in the world, you would always have high statistics out there.
Okay, we have started this on such a high, such a high note.
Yes.
But someone is watching this show, and maybe it's a father at home, and he says, "Oh well, I'm here, I'm present," but he's not necessarily present. Can you just take us a bit through the meaning of absent fathers and passive fathers? What does all this mean? Because there might be men who are in their homes and they think just because they are in their homes, they're paying rent or they're paying school fees, that's all that it takes. And there are others who might not be in the homes, but maybe whenever they show up, they actually do more fatherhood duties than those who are in the homes. I mean, just walk us through this whole definition around fatherhood.
Fatherhood. So fatherhood is a much broader component that many of us think it is. Now, it goes beyond the ability to sire a child. Just because you can have a child as a man does not make you a father.
Okay.
Okay? It is, there's a biological function of having a child, but that does not make you a father. So there is fatherhood in the sense of it being a verb. It's a function. You know, it's a function of presence versus absence. And let me just get into those: active, present, absent fatherhood. It is said that in the life of a child, when the father figure of the child is present and active, that means intentional in working with, disciplining, loving and offering affection and direction, providing, protecting, when all these qualities are present.
Sorry to cut you short. Affection is also...
That is, I'm going to get there because that is very, very important, especially for the girl child, and I'll get there. When that is wholesome, it produces a wholesome being where you see an adult who have a very healthy emotional intelligence, who have a self-esteem that is intact, who are secure in and of themselves, who don't have emotional instabilities. These are people who, most especially the fatherhood was right. So it is not just being there. It is being active. It is being able to notice the different stages of growth of your child and intervening and playing the role of a father. Now, motherhood and fatherhood are different templates of parenting. We all play different roles. The role you play as a mother is different than the role I would play as a father. Mothers have an innate ability to nurture. It's a natural gift. You nurture for 9 months. There's a sense of safety and security of children in your womb, and then they're nursing at your breast for about 2 years. There's this sense of bond that happens. Fatherhood comes in to enforce certain ideals of the family, rules of the family, discipline, creating structure. And that is very, very important for all of us as human beings, because structures and rules guide us. They guide us as a nation. There's no nation that would thrive and grow without rules, and so is a family. So there's something about the masculine voice in a home that is active, because it is possible to be in the home, but you're silent. And many of our fathers have been silent, again, for different reasons. But every time there's an active voice in a home, there's a nurturing that happens. There's a sense of stability that happens in the life of a child while they're growing up. So there are really a plethora of reasons there.
So active fatherhood involves intentionality, it involves affection, because some people have grown up in families where they have fathers and the fathers are nonchalant. They are almost not there. And in such cases, it's like the mother picks up the slack. It's like she has to do both, yet the father is in the house, and the kids can always tell.
It's amazing that you raise that point, because I keep telling a few friends of mine that the first decade in the life of a child is mostly mommy's decade. Because the innate need of a child is affection, love, just a sense of a loving environment. And I know that very many men and fathers have a little bit of a deficiency, not all, a little bit of a deficiency on the affection side. But when they transition into the second decade, from 10 years to 20 years, that is a very critical and foundational decade, and that should be daddy's decade. Because what is happening in that decade is that children are beginning to transition from the allegiance and dependence from their parents to their peers, because they are forming their own identity, their own personality. So that is when direction is needed. This is when girls begin to notice something different about the guy. This is when hormones kick in, testosterone for guys, estrogen for girls, and the male figure for a girl becomes one that they attract to. So if affection is not healthy at that, from daddy to a girl, because this is what happens in the second decade. The boy is seeking for a superhero. Okay, somebody who represents the ideal of a man to a boy. That is when fatherhood becomes real to a boy. I mean, my son is 6 years old right now. He wants to be like me. He walks like me. He has these things. But I know that when he transitions to his teenage years, there's something that he's going to begin to demand from me that he's not demanding from me right now. He's going to demand affirmation. He's going to demand direction. He's going to demand a sense of imputing wisdom and knowledge. The girl is going to demand a Prince Charming, somebody who represents love and affection. And whatever you model,
that's the
model.
Girl, that's what she will take.
That is usually what they are attracted to.
Yes.
So you will find that if there's been a deficiency of love and affection to a girl, she is going to grow up seeking it and looking for it in different places.
Yeah.
And the emotional stability is lost, because in decade 2, when they're forming their own identity and their sense of self and independence, the masculine voice has to be more intense in that age group, because it either makes or breaks them for life. So that is why presence and active intentional presence is important, especially in their second decade. In the first decade, that is mostly a disciplinarian. The voice of a father is, no, don't do it. I mean, my children, when their mom keeps telling them not to do something and they keep doing it, she tells them, I'm going to tell your daddy. And even if I'm not in the room, just that alone causes...
Magic happens when you say, I'm telling daddy.
Now, if I just say, hey, what has mommy said? Just that. Oh my goodness, everything aligns. Now, that's important. It's important. Now, when that's missing in the life of a preteen, when that's missing in the life of a teenager, it's a recipe for disaster. Yeah, and that's why we get all these statistics.
That's where I was heading to. So even passive fatherhood, we didn't really highlight on passive.
Yes.
Can you just briefly tell us more about passive fatherhood?
Passive fatherhood is when a father shows up, he comes back home every night, but he is disengaged from the role of parenting. Emotionally,
he's not there.
Emotionally, but even physically, these are fathers who rarely talk to their children. So mommy plays the role of disciplinarian, mommy plays the role of advocate, mommy plays the role of advisor. Dad is just, there's a sense of indifference. As long as I do what I feel I need to do, your stomachs are fed, you have a food over your heads, clothes on your back, just leave me alone. So these men come back and they're just engaged in their own world. Either newspapers, we all had watching news. Watching news
or a soccer match.
Exactly.
Or on his phone.
Yes. So there's that particular spot in the sitting room that is known where daddy sits and he doesn't want to be bothered, And there are moments where we need time alone just to recalibrate as men. But that does not mean that we resign from the role of fatherhood. It is dangerous. It is absolutely dangerous. And it's sometimes adversely damaging to the life of a child. I mean, way into adulthood.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is a father and a husband right now, and he's trying to grapple with his own fatherhood, even with his own relationship with his wife. And he told me something. He says, you see, from the time I was a child up until now, I can count the days I was in the same roof with my father. They're up to 16 days in my entire life. And he has struggled as a man because he has had no template of how do I love a woman in a way she needs to be loved? How do I raise a son in the way he needs to be raised? He has no template. And emotionally, he has struggled to grapple with life because of that. So there's a sense of stability that we get when our fathers are present. If they are not, we struggle a little bit more than we would have if he was active and present.
You've just talked about the emotional effects of fatherlessness. Can you tell us more about them? Some I know. There's a lot of insecurity. You even mentioned it earlier, especially from the girl child. Yeah. There is something we like to call, I mean, it's a street term, per se, daddy issues. Girls have relationships with men that are based on their relationship with their dad. And some girls will look for their dad in the men they date or in the man they marry. And you put this man on a pedestal. He's supposed to be your husband, but you're still looking for a father in him. Or, you know, these insecurities that come from father issues, daddy issues. Can you talk to us about some of them?
Oh, wow, Barbara, I don't even know.
A few. There are a lot. There are a lot. You know,
in all of us, we're emotional beings.
Yeah.
The way we process emotions as men is different from the way you process emotions as women. So our bend as men is more towards the logical side. And for you, you process through your emotions, how you feel. Now, all of us have this imaginary emotional bucket that we have. And the way you're parented fills this bucket with the right ingredients. Or if you're not parented well, your emotional bucket has holes. Okay? So every time somebody tries to speak affection and affirmation to you, it just leaks. It leaks because it doesn't hold. Because the person who builds an emotional bucket, so to speak, for it to be very well cemented and very well grounded, is mostly daddy in the life of a girl. Because when a girl grows up, she begins to seek for a sense of affirmation and a sense of affection because that is who she is. Now, if there was a deficiency of love and affection from daddy, she will try to make that up and try to overcompensate by seeking for somebody who will give that. Now, if it was in total deficiency, this person struggles to keep a relationship. She keeps abandoning relationships because, you know, this thing was unstable. There was a sense of instability emotionally for her. And there's a craving she has. She can't put her finger quite onto what that craving is. And because daddy was never there, daddy was mean to mommy, daddy was in and out, she always expects the worst from men. So even when she gets a good man, she is very quick to push that man away because she expects that this man will leave anyway because daddy left. Okay? So you find that a young lady barely keeps a relationship because she feels she's not good enough, she's not worth it, she's not, I mean, there's a lot of emotional deficiency in there. And that is translated into our relationships. And same is for the guy. You know, I cannot keep a relationship as a guy because my father modeled absence. He modeled abuse. He modeled all these things. Now, these are things that we hate about daddy.
But we eventually do.
It is an unconscious thing that we end up doing. We end up doing what we hate. You know, there are two guys who had an extremely abusive father who was abusive when he got drunk. So he was an alcoholic. And when they grew up, they took different paths. One man ended up becoming a very responsible person in society, did well. He was totally sober and, you know, just took an opposite turn. His brother, on the other hand, became just like his father, a drunkard, an abusive man in his relationship. So they asked them, so for you, how come you you don't drink? How come you've taken on a sober life? He said, you know, I saw who my father was, and I promised to myself that I will never be like my father. The other guy said, I saw who my father was, and I ended up being like my father. Two guys, same model, they were modeled the same, but they took different paths. So our lives can turn out differently based on how you hate the way you saw your father, or you just dragged into the same world as your father. So when it comes to emotional issues, anger, resentment, abuse, by the way, can happen both ways. You can be an abusive wife to your husband by being emotionally abusive, being verbally abusive. And for men, we can be abusive to our wives by being silent and being detached and indifferent, or by being physically abusive. You know, but most of that is tethered to how we were fathered.
Talking about fatherhood, it's brought to my mind my own personal experience. I was raised by a father who believed I could achieve anything I wanted to achieve. So two things. So he raised me to believe I could achieve anything I wanted to achieve. And actually, it gave me the drive to always go for stuff, to always go. I mean, I'm a go-getter. And come to
it shows.
Yeah. I'm a go-getter because I grew up, my father telling me, you can be anything.
Wow.
It doesn't matter if you're a girl.
Wow.
You can be anything. You can always be the first if you wanted to. So I always believed that anything, he always liked to say, Barbara, everything you put your mind to, you will do it perfectly. Now, that was so good because it instilled in me confidence and esteem. I do not have esteem issues. I do not have esteem issues. I do not walk in rooms and feel small. I do not. Now, on the flip side of that, my father put high expectations on me. Like there was no room for failure. Like when I failed, it would be the end of the world at home. Like if I didn't come the top of the class or the top 3, if I was the 4th or 5th, I was afraid to go home. I'll be like, Dad is going to be so sad. Dad is going to be angry.
I have let Daddy down.
I've let Daddy down. It was never about me succeeding. It was always about making Dad happy. So on the flip side, he didn't teach me to live with failure.
To fail forward.
So, and if he watches this, I'm not going to be let off the hook. But I can see that his push made me excel at so many things that I have tried, and it has led me where I am. But I struggle with failure. I struggle with failure. I struggle with forgiving myself when I fail. Oh my God.
Self-criticism is very, very high.
Oh my God.
Because of the expectations.
Because of the expectations. And as a result, I also tend to do the same for people. So we project you see. So I know that when Barbara comes into this business deal or into this relationship or this conversation, she's coming 100%. She's giving you the best. I'll give you the best of myself any day, any time. But if you don't give me the best, if you don't give me the best.
Unbelievable. You know what? It's quite interesting. You've given an example of yourself because we do some leadership training together. And I see that in you. But I've never known that was something that your dad kind of imparted on you. And this is where, as fathers, we need to have a sense of balance. A sense of balance is that you are a high achiever. One of the most confident people I know, who, you know, walks with your head leveled on your shoulders. You cannot be bullied, and that's good. That's a sense of confidence that anyone would desire for their child to have, because it's an ingredient for life, to be able to do well in life. But that level of expectation that was set on you, whereby failure now draws you back where you feel like, you know, the worst human being. I think that was the imbalance.
That was the imbalance, yeah.
That happened. And for fathers, what we say to our children,
oh my God,
is far-reaching. It is actually, by the way, more deeply rooted than what mommy says.
Oh, so much.
Yeah. And this is both boys and girls. What we do is or what we don't do.
Or what we don't do, yes.
Is far-reaching into who our kids become.
Yeah.
And we need to have a sense of balance. So there is presence. You have to be active. But then you have to be balanced in the way you raise your children.
You have to be human.
Yeah. Now, there's this thing called overcompensation that happens with parenting, with fatherhood. I grew up, most of our dads grew up either outside of Rwanda as refugees.
I was about to ask you your personal experience with fatherhood.
Yes, with my own father.
With your own father.
My father was an overachiever, somebody who broke out of a cycle of poverty and lack, and he made something good out of himself. He became one of the finest architects in Uganda. I was born and raised in Uganda. My father married my mom, who was Rwandan, a Rwandan refugee. And he was excellent. I mean, he was the first architect with a master's degree in Kampala in the 60s. Wow. And this is when Uganda was rebuilding, the time of independence. So most of the skyscrapers that were built between the 60s and the 80s in Uganda have his fingerprint on it. So for me, when I was raised by him, the ideal of a hardworking, successful man was my father. And like you, I don't take failure very, very kindly. And I've always had a belief in myself that I will succeed at anything I put my mind to. And my father just modeled it. He was a very quiet man. He didn't say too much. So the imbalance as well is that he didn't speak into my life. And, you know, for me, I just watched the way he did his things. And I have this success hunger in my life, that whatever I put my hand to, I want to do it well. I want to use it to serve people. He was also like a patriarch. In our home, we always had like 30, 40 people living in our home at any given time. He was taking care of his brother's son, his cousin's kid. So he loved to help people. That I caught from him as well. So that is on my side. Then at 11 years old, when I turned 11, my father died. And when my father died, because he was a Muslim wealthy man, so he had many women and many children. So we entered into a crisis of trying to divide. I was still young. I had older siblings, 18 children. I was the second last born. So I have very, very old siblings. We went into the crisis of how do we divide this property? And it was a mess. It was a mess. Now, for us, we got lost. We got lost because that's when I was forming my identity, becoming a teenager. I just got lost. No direction in life, no father figure over me. So I had to grapple with a lot of those deficiencies that I dealt with as a young man. And I carried them on into raising my family. So one of the things that I've always been very, very big on is prepare for your family and prepare well. I have a will. Yes, I wrote a will when I turned 30 years.
Wasn't that written out of trauma?
No, a little bit out of trauma. But why? You prepare. Once you have children, prepare for them. Because when, God forbid, you know, you're no longer available and you didn't have any kind of structure around property, your primary dependents suffer. So that's the other thing about fatherhood, is that some fathers just leave that to fate. And that can be dangerous, especially if you have many children by many women. You know, that can be a bit of a challenge. But coming back to the issue of emotional instability, our fathers are like wells of wisdom. They pour a lot into us emotionally, cognitively. You find many, many people, their father was long gone, but they keep referring to, my dad used to say, my father used to say this and that. We don't remember what our teacher Claudine said in P2. or teacher Solange in P7. But somehow we remember a statement that our father said, whether good or bad. So that's the level of impact that our dads have on us. And that's why it's important for us to look at fatherhood as raising the next generation. And I keep, as in my role as pastor of the men at CLA, I keep encouraging men and telling them, look, you don't have to be a biological father for you to play the role and the function of a father to another generation. Many men are growing up without fathers. But any masculine voice that is responsible can be able to raise up somebody who didn't grow up without a father. So we need to have a sense of patriarchy of sorts to give over ourselves to parenting the next generation, to fathering the next generation, so that they will grow up emotionally stable, with a stable sense of esteem, so that they can perpetuate good fatherhood and good parenting and good citizenry, by the way, in the future.
There is a friend of mine. I will not mention his name, but I know when he watches this show, he's going to know I'm talking about him. The first time I met him, we were talking, and instantly I could tell that this man was structured.
Wow.
Like, and over the course of our friendship and for the time I've known him, I mean, spectacular. So guess what? We sit, we talk, then I ask him, what's your relationship with your father? He was surprised. He was like, how did that come up? I'm like, I know why I'm asking. So he tells me his father, I will not mention his father's name, but he always talks about his father.
Yes.
And the lessons he's learned from his father, you can tell.
Yeah.
This is one friend. Then I have another friend of mine. He's also a man, has a sweet soul. He has a very good heart, but he's crazy. Sorry for using the word crazy, but like something is off.
No structure, is not stable.
Yeah, there is something off. And we have also had the same conversation about his relationship with his father, and he had an absent father.
Yeah.
So you can always tell when a man has, well, though it works both ways.
Yeah.
The relationship a man has with his father affects who he turns out to be in his life, and the relationship a man has with his mother. When it comes to relationships now, I'm giving tips to the singles. Yeah, let's go for a break. We'll come back after the break, and we'll finish up on fatherhood. Thanks for following. Welcome back to the Barbara Show. This is your interactive, engaging show that brings testimonials, interviews, conversations that help us bridge the gap, learn from the young generation, from the elderly, and become better people. Thank you for following us. Thank you for following us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. I love your support. I love your feedback. We were talking about fatherhood with Hassan Kibirango. He's a pastor, he's a businessman, he's a leadership coach, and married and a father to 4 kids. And his experience with mentoring men has taught him so much about fatherhood and manhood, and that's what we're talking about. So before the break, we were talking about what fathers do in our lives. Hassan, we have, like the example I just gave, there are some wonderful souls, wonderful gentlemen in heart, but when it comes to structure in life, when it comes to reasoning, when it comes to these other things, they fall short. They have insecurities. They, you know, when it comes to their own fatherhood, it's still a struggle. What happens to men who didn't grow up with their fathers around?
Oh wow, a lot. A lot happens to men, and for me.
And what can they do? Because you also mentioned here, learning from your example. Yeah,
I mean, growing up in my formative years without a father, it made me lack a lot. I didn't have a sense of direction. Somebody to just say, this is the way that you should go. Walk in it. This is how a man acts. This is how a man treats a lady. This is how a man handles work. This is how a man handles money. This is how a man fathers. You know, we lack that. So we have to kind of grapple with it and kind of pick up from different examples, and it's a bit messy. If you, by the grace of God, you do not walk with either fellow men or learn from men who mentor you or, you know, play a father role over you, we struggle. We struggle as men. And unfortunately, there's abuse. There's abuse in relationships, in marriages. There's even abuse of our own children.
Yes.
And by abuse, I don't necessarily mean a man who beats his kids up or beats his wife up. No,
Even emotional
abuse by just not being there or being somebody who is very angry and short-fused and all these things. It's important for us to know that as men, we learn a lot from our fathers or from a father figure. My mentor, this is a man whose fatherhood amazes me like crazy. This man lost his father when he was 6 months in his mother's womb. His father died. He grew up without a father, and that messed him up. When he was in his secondary school, he moved from the village into the city, and he was taken on by this gentleman. He didn't know him. Somebody referred him to this young man, and he came and started to be at home. This man would, out of pity, pay school fees for him. And this young man started off really almost like as a house help in this home. But with time, because he was responsible, he performed well in school, this man brought him close. Now, this man had his own biological children, but he brought this young man close. And he offered fatherhood over this young man. This young man grew up. And then this gentleman made up for what he lacked from his father. Now, when you see him raise his children, the level of balance, the level of fatherhood, that sense of my dad is there and I know that he cares for me. All-roundedness, he is there in their sports games at school. His son just graduated valedictorian, the top of his class in one of the schools here. And what he did, he is so intentional about his fatherhood. When his children were transitioning into their teenage years, he noticed that they had all these boys as their friends. So this man made it his personal mission to walk a journey with all the friends of his sons. He has 3 boys. And he created a program, a mentorship program for the boys. Now, they didn't know that he was doing that, but for him, he was intentionally building a relationship and offering a relationship of fatherhood to these others. Now, they reached a point where they were now finishing school. Most of them were finishing secondary school. Most of them came top of their class. Why? Because they were like, we cannot let down uncle so-and-so. You know. Now, where they had a deficiency from their own fathers who did not play, let's say, a very active role, this man made up for it.
Wow.
What am I saying? It is possible for us to offer fatherhood because it's not just a biological function. It is a function of being there, speaking life, guiding, directing. I father so many young men outside of my own biological children. I have 4 children, but I've so far mentored more than 120 men and women. I walk a year's journey with them, you know, and I offer a certain voice to them, a certain sense of direction and mentorship to them. And many of them, some of them, I'm only maybe 6-7 years older than them, but they see a father figure in me because I've opened up my life to them. They come home, they see how I parent, they see how I husband, they see how I work. I teach them how to make money, business, and all that. So fatherhood is something that we can offer to a generation even beyond our own biological spaces. That is why we can avert this crisis. And that is why fatherhood for every man watching me out there should be a cause to say, I am going to take on the journey of working with a few young men or young girls and offer fatherhood, especially to those who didn't have a father. And it's very, very important if we are to sustain the growth that this nation is on. You know, there's something interesting. And very many men, the reason for passivity and not being active is I am busy. I'm trying to fend for my family.
Make money.
Yeah. But you see, making money and having means does not make up for your presence, unfortunately. Somehow, we can't have our bread and eat it too. Our children are more desirous of you as a person than what you can offer them. And because many fathers lacked, they overcompensate by giving gifts to children because they were poor. So they are trying to overcompensate. And what we don't know is that we are moving from rags, other than from rags to riches, we are moving from rags to rags in just 3 generations. Because you give. I never had shoes when I was growing up. We've had these stories from our fathers. Yes. I used to walk in barefoot for 15 kilometers to go to school. You know, therefore I will buy you 25 pairs of shoes just to overcompensate. But if I am not there to tell you the value of life when you have nothing, when you have a bit more, to show you the way that you should go, especially fathers to sons, because mothers kind of do this fairly with their daughters, and then to show your daughters that this is how a woman is treated. You are beautiful. Mm-hmm. You are meant to be loved and treasured. And for girls to hear that so that they can build a self-esteem that is intact, then we are headed for crisis. Mm-hmm. So we try to overcompensate by offering gifts and all these things to our children, but we don't offer the values that they need to pass this on to their own children. And when I talk to most men, men are like, I'm busy. But you're busy making money for your children, but your children will not sustain this money or this wealth if you do not teach them the values that they need to sustain it. So we have to have a sense of balance. Yes, you're a provider. We acknowledge that role. But then also, you are a teacher. You're a guide. You're a counselor. You're an advocate. You are an imparter of wisdom. And what you tell your child sticks as a father, much more than very many instructors out there that they may find in life. So we need to take that role seriously. But beyond our biological spaces, we can do it and overextend it out there.
Yeah, I've picked 2 things. You could have grown up without a father figure, but that shouldn't stop you from getting a father figure to mentor you.
Yes.
So that you become good as a father, as a husband, because you need a model. But also, the fathers that we have out there in the society should extend fatherhood to other children who are not their biological children.
Absolutely. Because
it will create a lasting impact. And finally, as we close, we have single mothers who are raising their children alone without the fathers, and they're also raising boys or girls, but they're doing it alone. We also have married women who are actually doing it alone, yet they have the fathers, the husbands present, but they're actually not present. What would you tell those women?
First of all, I empathize. And I know that it is a very difficult journey to parent singularly, especially as a mother. Now, there are certain functions that you try to play because the man is absent. By virtue of the fact that you're not the father, it's very difficult to play some of these roles. What I would recommend, 2 things. Number 1 is never demonize the father of the children, even if the man is absent. Why? Because these children are part of him, and he is part of them. And children get so conflicted when they start growing up. They feel like, okay, when I call daddy, am I breaking mommy's heart? Or am I, how does she feel? So they get lost in this tension.
That also affects them
a lot. Now, especially if you're a mother who, you know, I keep saying this, that when you call your husband, ex-husband or whoever, especially if it was a messy relationship, and you know, you're talking with your girlfriends, you're like, men are trash. Men are dogs. Imagine now, you're on call, your children are listening. You know, when you call men dogs, your children will start barking because they are part of who this man is.
They're listening.
So what is important is to separate your own issues with the father of the children, but open the door for the children that this will always be your father. Now, he might never walk into that door. He might never be present, but never create a space where they deeply hate their father just because you and him had issues. Now, to very many mothers, and I know for some, the reason they separate is really, really different, and some it was out of abuse, anger and resentment. There's that sense of, you know,
or
he
some,
treated
he
me.
died.
Yeah, there's that
Yeah, but still the woman is doing it alone.
Alone. So that's number one. Number two is if the man does not have a relationship with his children, the father, do whatever you can, especially when they transition from into their second decade, from 11 to 20, to try and find men that could offer this sense of fatherhood around your children. Now, it might never be the same because daddy is daddy. You can't replace that. But they can play a fatherhood role without ever being called daddy. It's very, very important because it's a building block to adulthood, to building healthy adulthood. And if a man is responsible, maybe things didn't work out between you, but is playing a good role as a father, let's say, you know, there's a way you work things out, encourage that as much as possible. As much as possible. Encourage them to visit their father, encourage them to spend time with their father as and when they can, because he fills a void that only him can fill. So that is really what I would advise in the situation of mothers raising children alone. And I know it's not an easy journey. I empathize, but it's important for us to still do not represent negativity of your ex-husband or your ex-boyfriend or whatever the case was to the children, but then find some men around these children as they grow to kind of fill that void if the father was absent.
Well, thank you. I could hear you the whole day talking about these issues, but thank you so much for honoring us and coming to share these gems with us, because we are building a nation that we want to be, you know, developed physically, what we see, the buildings and stuff, but a nation that also has a soul, a healthy soul. I as a Rwandan want that. So I love what we are achieving, but I want our families to be healthy, and we're contributing to that.
Can I just say something very, very small? Sorry, I know you're closing.
Yes.
One day when I was still in business, many years ago, I was driving by MTN Center.
Yes.
This must have been 2008, 9. And then the cars were stopped, you know, and the police was in the way. And I asked, what's going on? Somebody said, hey, by the way, the president is at Green Hills picking his children from school. I was floored. I said, our president, the busiest man in this nation? And you've heard stories about how very deeply involved. I mean, I've seen pictures of him attending graduations of his children. And for me, he has modeled fatherhood to this nation in a way that challenges me as a man. And secondly, in a way that really gives me no excuse to be a father, because I don't think I'm 10% as busy as he is. So it's important for us to even in spite of our busy schedules, we can make time to father. And it means a lot to our children. Oh,
I feel like we can keep doing this.
Sorry,
okay, this is the last time I do this, then I'm closing off. The thing of picking kids at school.
Oh my goodness.
Fathers,
yes,
pick your kids at school. Make time on the weekend. I know men love to chill on the weekend, watch soccer games. I know they love that. Or even for us Christians, that's when they go to these prayer groups. But weekends, give weekends to your children and to your wives, because you are modeling relationships to them. The way you treat their mother is what you're teaching them to be the right way to treat their wives in the future, or to be treated as wives when they grow up. So much we could say, but you know, Hassan, you're coming back. You're coming back. Thank you so much for following The Barbara Show. It's always a pleasure. Please like this video, share it with your friends on your WhatsApp, on Instagram. Give us a like on YouTube. Share. I appreciate. Thank you so much. Stay well, stay blessed. Wakoze gukurikira ikiganiro The Barbara Show. Nimba ukibonye kuri YouTube The Barbara Show, kora subscribe ujye ukomeza kubona amakuru n'ibindi biganiro byinshi bikomeza kuza. Nimba udukurikira kuri Facebook, nimba udukurikira kuri Instagram, tumaze udukurikire, turakwishimiye cyane. No kuri Twitter muzajya mukomeza kubona amakuru, ndetse ntimukasibe kureba iki kiganiro ku Isibo TV. Turabashimiye rero ku mwanya wanyu mwaduhaye.